Well, hello there, and I do hope you're all well. Now we're back to this guy again, SNP MP for Glasgow South West, Chris Stevens. Now he wanted to ask about, has this cruel DWP improved on its decision-making policy? I.e., when a claimant gets knocked back, appeals, and still gets knocked back, and when taken to a tribunal, and the claimant wins their case against the DWP, and what lessons have the DWP learnt? Well, you can always tell when a minister isn't happy about the question when they say, "Well, I'm glad you raised this point."
Thank you very much. Chris Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. When you turn to decisions making and improving quality. So, Minister, the Department still loses the vast majority of appeals over PIP that come before tribunal, and the most recent data available on ESA appeals shows the same pattern. The last formal research the Department carried out in tribunal losses was in 2012, before PIP was introduced. So would there be value in repeating similar research now so we can establish what the Government's learned so far and changes in policy?
I'm really pleased you're looking at this, because we too take this extremely seriously, and we were able to start taking some actions from the research already carried out, and perhaps it might be helpful if I work through what those actions are and then where we think that places us today. That research in 2012 was a pilot scheme where tribunal judges provided DWP with high-level reasons for the overturn of decisions. That was absolutely invaluable then in helping the department to be able to identify the main categories of reasons why decisions are overturned at appeal. From that pilot then, following that pilot, the department now routinely collects information on the reasons for PIP decisions being overturned at appeal. And this information obviously then gives us insight into trends, which is very important. I can then state quite clearly, sitting here today, that we know that the main reasons that decisions are overturned on appeal are threefold. Firstly, tribunals drawing a different conclusion based on the same evidence.
No shit, Sherlock.
Secondly, cogent oral evidence provided by the individual. Or thirdly, new written evidence provided at the hearing. Now, what has all of that insight allowed us to do? It helps us to make improvements to our decision-making process. We've introduced a new approach to decision-making at both the initial decision and the MR stage, the mandatory reconsideration stage, and that's what we've already just touched upon, giving decision-makers more time to be able to proactively contact customers where they think additional evidence is going to be able to support the claim, and a similar approach applies at the appeal stage as well. What has that new approach resulted in? It's allowed for a greater proportion of decisions being changed at mandatory consideration, which in turn has contributed to a reduction in the proportion of decisions being lodged, a report resulting in an appeal being lodged. By way of evidence on that, only 7% of initial decisions made in 2020 to 2021 have seen an appeal lodged against them, compared to 9% in the previous year and 10% in the 3 years previous. So we've used that 2012 research, we've gained insight, we've applied those insights to what we're doing, and we've made improvements. There will be more to do, but I hope that gives an overview of how we have responded and where we now stand.
Okay, so in the last 5 years, the number of DWP benefit decisions appealed has fallen quite considerably, but the success rate has risen from 55% to 70%. Does look like the department's not learning much, doesn't it, Minister?
Clearly not.
I think there's some broader context to give actually about the success rate of appeals in terms of the overall. But Katie,
shall I share the data, if that's helpful, Minister? So for PIP, across the lifetime of PIP, we've had about 9% of decisions go to tribunal, and a bit more than half of them successful, so that's 5% overall. For ESA, as you say, it's similar, but it's slightly lower, so 3% going to appeal, and again, more than half successful, so 2% overall. So within the context of the benefit, these are quite small percentages, but we absolutely want to learn the lessons. and put them into everything we're doing. And I think particularly as we design the new health transformation programme, making sure, and the Minister's described this a little bit, but making sure that as early as possible in the process, we're helping customers to understand what evidence we do need to make decisions, with a view to trying to absolutely get the decisions right first time for the customer.
Right, but that doesn't explain why in the last 5 years the number of appeals has actually fallen quite considerably, but the success rate is going up from 55% to 70%. So what's been going on in the last 5 years to explain that?
I think what we've been trying to do is look through the journey of the process. So what happens at the beginning? What does the decision maker do at mandatory reconsideration? What are the lessons learned feeding back from mandatory reconsiderations, which we feed back monthly to providers, and we feed back in lessons learned. And then, as the Minister's described, what are the lessons we can learn from the cases that are overturned at tribunal, and how can we constantly improve our processes and build that into the design of the new service.
Okay, thanks, Minister. I'll get back to what you'd said. I think you'd said that one of the reasons for appeals was oral evidence. Is this oral evidence that's given at the first assessment?
It would be given at various stages in the process, but that statement is relevant to the reconsideration and tribunal stages.
It supports recording for all interviews, doesn't it? It also probably supports, you also mentioned written evidence, it probably supports the question asked earlier about assessments reports being given to all claimants as part of default. But it looks like I think we would like to see some more objective research and analysis published. But if I can turn now to the work capability assessment outcomes, what's preventing the Department from publishing data on the outcomes for universal credit claimants and work capability assessments?
So the committee will have seen the note that the Secretary of State sent to the Chair following his letter in June. And she did reply on a number of points around data. And as you will know, she explained that there are no plans to develop the official statistics on universal credit claimants going through a WCA. We will be keeping that position under review, but as she said very clearly, she anticipates there will be fewer resources available and is not going to be committing to developing new statistics at this stage.
Well, Dr Geiger, in his evidence to us, described the Department's failure to publish work capability assessment statistics as unacceptable, and which make it difficult to tell whether and where problems might exist in the system or where improvements have been made. Now, that seems to me to be a compelling reason to publish. So, Minister, what's the compelling reason for not publishing?
Good question.
I've emphasised the reason that the Secretary of State has already given, and I don't have a great deal to add to it. I mean, I appreciate the point that the Professor makes, and actually the totality, of course, of all of the evidence that this committee has taken, including what the Professors had to say on a range of things, is extremely helpful. But that said, I don't think there is a great deal I can add to what's already been said. We do have to take a broad overview across all the effort and resources that needs to be deployed on the various functions, only one of which is the production of data. And I think what the Secretary of State's letter provided to the committee was that good overview.
I'm sure the committee will take a view. So my final question, Chair, in this section is in July, earlier this month, the Department published a large amount of data and contractual targets for PIP assessments in response to a parliamentary question. So can I ask why the Department chose that route rather than, for example, publish that on gov.uk?
Well, I'm always delighted to be held to account by Parliament and answer parliamentary questions. That's a vital function of what a minister does. Would you like to go into that data? We're here and ready and happy to do so.
Yes.
I think
the issue is, Minister, is it chose a parliamentary question to release that data, not on gov.uk. So how does that fit in with the much vaunted principles of openness and transparency that we often hear about?
The data was published. I'm not really going to enter into an ongoing row about the way in which it's done. The data has rightly been published in answer to a PQ, perfectly normal procedure, and we'd be then happy to go into a discussion of the data.
Okay, thank you.
If there's to be a parliamentary question about how many work capability assessments have been undertaken by people applying for universal credit, would that question be answered?
That's an excellent hypothetical from the chair. I would consider any question on its merits.
Okay.
Now let's be honest here. Was it 77%? He said win their claims at a tribunal. Now it shouldn't have to come to that, really, should it? My thought process is that they knock them back and they go for a mandatory reconsideration, and then they still knock them back in the hope that they just give up and accept the situation. And when they go for a tribunal, they just seem to clearly lose more than they win, don't they? But what do you guys think? Right, I shall leave the video here. Have a wonderful weekend, and till the next time, I shall bid you farewell and never trust a Tory.